Good morning, this is Houndog Steve wishing you a very pleasant morning, and looking behind me there, I hope that white bright window is not too distracting. But anyways, somebody put into the comments a question about, after my walk and talk, what was my take on crypto and Bitcoin. And essentially my position hasn't changed at all. Now, I don't know whether any of you knew this, but I used to actually give presentations on Bitcoin as an introduction, and I used to tell people that basically you have your three main cryptos, that is Bitcoin, Ethereum and Litecoin, and they are not going to go away because they're proving themselves time after time to be a valuable asset. Bitcoin for transference of funds backwards and forwards safely and efficiently. When you get into Ethereum, this is for more complicated smart contracts, and Litecoin would be for everyday transactions. Everything else, including XRP, everything else is gambling. Okay? It's really just it's a stock market. You do not know. These are controlled, totally manipulated, and so of course is Bitcoin, Ethereum and Litecoin to a degree, but all of those others, well, you're taking a risk. Okay, you're taking a risk. Now, why I am so bullish on those three coins, Bitcoin especially, is that it's been proving itself for close to 10 years now from its inception, and it has proved to be unassailable. And this is probably the most important thing to take away from all of this, because at the end of the day, you see, what I think there comes a time when you just can't use facts and numbers. You have to look at human nature. And so we have a situation brewing in Europe where they're converting over to a central bank digital euro, and that means that everything that is in the bank is going to be tracked. So people who have wealth, especially, because when you do this changeover, they're going to ask you, I think I mentioned that, well, where did that come from? You'll have to justify where all of that money came from, and you might just have a hard time doing that, or it'll certainly be just a heart-wrenching process. So where are you going to put your money? Going to put it in paper? Any paper asset? Any bond? Any trade? I don't think I'd be trusting anything written on paper, because as we just saw with the CME, they just changed margin rates and dumped silver. This just shows you how dishonest and how quickly these people will change the rules when they promised faithfully, that we had a contract, we had a deal, that this is how it was going to work, but you were going to lose, so you changed the rules. So where do you put your money? Okay, you got the other two, of course, is gold and silver, but you have to have that in physical, and that is really clunky to transact. And at the end of the day, we live in a worldwide network of corporation production, I should say, manufacturing, and we all want things, and to do that, you need to be able to transact. Okay, so how do you do that? Do you do that in gold? You're going to ship tons and tons of gold from one place to another, which is highly unsafe. It costs you money to store gold. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't have gold or silver in your portfolio, but what I'm saying is that when we also need a quick, efficient and safe method to transact. And actually I find it kind of funny, because I heard Bitcoin mentioned in the blacklist. There was more than one episode where these huge criminals who were all attached to government, it was all corruption in and out of our bureaucracies and so on and so forth, as well as the criminal mastermind, huge businessmen, and they were using Bitcoin because it was a safe method of transaction. And so if a criminal trusts this, surely that is telling you something, right? So yes, it's taken a dip. I think this is same with silver. I think this is to shake out the weak hands, and there will come a point, if you want to play that game, if you sold out at 125 and now you want to buy in again, oh yes, you can make a huge profit doing that. You can really increase your Bitcoin holding, but I can assure you with the size of the banks that are involved, the investors that are involved now, you'll see a point where you will sell your Bitcoin and then you suddenly can't buy it again because it's just gone, it got scooped. Remember, some of the facts and figures about Bitcoin are absolutely astounding. There's only 21 million Bitcoins. 5 million of those are completely lost forever. They'll be never recovered. And we're at the point now where there's only 1.6 million Bitcoins left to be mined out of the process. And far less than 1% of the world owns any holdings in Bitcoin. And like I say, these institutions are gobbling this stuff up, so the pressure is going to be on, because we need a fair way to transact with people that cannot be intercepted, that can't be taxed or tolled other than through the mining process. And so that's why Bitcoin will survive. And so will Litecoin, because they like I say, 10, 11 years now, is it? I think it's 11 years that these three have been around. And of course, the need for smart contracts, and Ethereum is the foundation for so many other cryptos. And they won't all go away, but an awful lot will, because an awful lot were rubbish to begin with, or they were duplicates, and people were, using this in pump and dumps and so on and so forth. And yeah, sure, they made a lot of money doing that, but there's an awful lot lost money doing that. So I still think that this is a buying opportunity for people who want to buy into Bitcoin, because this window is closing. And I don't think people realize what an existential threat to the banks Bitcoin is, because Bitcoin eliminates fractional reserve. You can't do that. It just Bitcoin just says that's a fraud. So now all of these institutions have to play on a level playing field with the general public, and of course they will try and play the game like they did in the silver market, but we're finding now that that's falling apart. And the same thing will happen when they try to play the same game with using Bitcoin to back 10 to 1. Why would you need to go through the bank if we're all transacting in Bitcoin anyway? So yes, the banks are very, very scared about this, and they've done everything that they possibly can, and now that's the reason they are trying to co-opt Bitcoin and put it in their own portfolios. And there's a big headline today I saw on some of my crypto news coming in. Oh, Harvard sold their Bitcoin. Yeah, okay. So they sold 25% of their Bitcoin, and what did they do with it? They bought Ethereum. This is Harvard University. Some of the best mathematical minds in the world, sit on that board. So sometimes you don't get told directly. You have to look at what other people are doing, and why would they do that? If this was going nowhere, if this was going into some huge monstrous hole in the ground, well, it wouldn't work. They wouldn't do it, because these people, they're so they're that way about money. They want you to have none, and they want to have it all. So that is my take on Bitcoin. So I just want to get into quickly a little bit about money. I've come up with this very simple explanation because most people don't understand money and the trick that takes place within money and fractional reserve, and how devastating it is, because it happens on such a grand scale. It's hard to see, and many of the videos that I've watched trying to explain this really don't quite encompass how disastrous it is. So what I've done is I go back to completely simple. This is kindergarten level. Because it's the only way to see the trick that happens. Okay, so we're going to pretend a little game here. I am the first banker, the first bank, and you are the first borrower. Okay, there's no other money in the world, there's just you and me, and you want to borrow $1,000. So just for example, well, under fractional reserve, I technically only have to have $100 in my bank to be able to facilitate that. So I agree, and I write out a check, not money, write out on a piece of paper, $1,000, and before I hand that over and we agree, I say, well, okay, Mr. Jones, I'm taking some risk here. I think you should pay 10% interest on that so I can cover my risk, which sounds reasonable. Okay, so now you owe the bank, you owe me $1,100. But wait a minute. Let's just add up what we have here. I've got $100 in the till. You have $1,000, and you owe me an extra $100 in interest. That's $1,200. But I only gave you $1,000, and I only have there's only $1,100 in existence in the world, and yet I'm demanding back $100 in interest that cannot possibly be paid because it was never created. And this is the trick. Okay, all this interest is the national debt. That is unpaid interest compounding year after year, month after month, and growing into staggering proportions. And that's what happens to all the interest that can't be paid. You know, it's added into the accounting system, but it's got nowhere to go because you can't pay it. Now, of course, I've had people, I know this question is going to pop into your mind, because I've had people who say, well, I paid off my loans and blah-de-blah-de-blah. Well, yes, you did. But what actually happened was, you know, you took money out of the principal portion and you used it to pay off the interest portion which wasn't created. Okay, so it's like a kind of stealing out of one pile, robbing Peter to pay Paul. Okay, well that, like I say, that can only go on for so long, and that's where we are right now. This is why we're having all the problems that we're having right now, because this interest is accumulating so quickly now, and there's no place for it to go. And that's the essential flaw in the whole system. As long as we continue to print, $1,000 out of 100, which is highly inflationary, and we never create the interest with a loan. You know, the guy who took the $1,000 from the bank, we already foreclosed. You already lost the farm, buddy, because I knew you couldn't pay. And so technically all of this debt is illegal debt. Okay, you cannot issue a debt that cannot be paid. And I have proved to you that no debt can be paid, really. And interesting enough, the banks kind of tell you, and the mortgage companies tell you that they know that there's some horribly stinking trick going on here, because they make you pay the interest first. Okay, when you look at your mortgage payments, when you first take out a mortgage, you'll find that, something like 7/8 of your payment goes into the interest portion, and only a tiny 1/8 goes into the principal portion. So the banks grab the unpayable part first that was never created with the loan, and leaves you to worry about the rest. So it's a very clever trick. It's a sleight of hand. And I would remind you that I believe it was Sir John Kenneth Galbraith who said, the ease with which banks create money is so simple, the mind is repelled. Okay? And as I showed you, it's so simple. But it is absolutely devastating, because what it creates in society is a game of musical chairs. Okay, but this isn't just an ordinary chair. If you lose your chair in the game, you're sleeping on the street tonight. Okay, and so this makes us all economic competitors in the system, because nobody wants to sleep on the street, right? And of course, as the game, just like any other musical chairs game, once you get to that point where there's only a few chairs left, my God, it gets pretty damn intense. And that is where we are. That is why it seems like everything is speeding up, that everyone's going crazy, nothing seems to be able to meet, everyone's a little bit short, that sales campaigns are becoming aggressive and ruthless, there is rip-offs taking place, misdirection, misinformation on the products that you buy. How many of you have been disappointed with an Amazon product when it actually arrived on your doorstep? You kind of wish that there was a doorstep theft in some cases, right? But this is what happens. So this is why they're so afraid. And if Bitcoin takes over, this is my hope for the world, is that if Bitcoin becomes the reserve currency in the world and eliminates fractional reserve, it is going to ease so much problem. It's going to ease the whole greed problem. Everybody knows who is working, knows that they have to have 1.5–2% more coming in next year than they do this year just to stay in the same position. And so people become greedy. People take excess. They take more out of the system than they really need to because of that fear that inflation is going to catch up with them. And it starts this deadly game in society, and like I say, we become economic competitors with each other. And Bitcoin, now this may take 50, 75, 100 years for us to culturally take on the idea of being economic cooperators, and that we don't have to fight inflation ad infinitum, and that because inflation always takes a currency to zero. We've seen this in the Weimar Republic, in Zimbabwe. China has been through several collapses in the past, and so we know where this goes. And all the mess that you see is for them to try and patch up, to try and stop it from coming to an end. And this system was designed to end, and so it will end. And again, that's why there will be a flight to safety, and at some point, I don't think it's too far away. I don't know when, but I don't think it's too far away at all right now, judging by the frantic behaviour in society. But there will be a complete capitulation, and we will shift into this new paradigm, and we'll sort it out. We'll use a digital currency. Bitcoin will be the reserve currency of the world, and every currency in every country will be measured against that. And then we will go into a period of price discovery, and that will take a few years. So it's going to take time. It takes time for these things to unfold. But there you go. That's why we're in the situation that we're in. And I think it's important to understand how deadly that is, and what it is that Bitcoin is actually bringing to the table here, which is huge, because every problem that I look at, its root cause is somehow involved in trying to offset inflation, just shaving that extra thousandths of an inch or a millimetre or what have you off the product to try and save that inflation. It's got to come from somewhere. And it will never be paid. It will never, ever, ever be paid. And again, that's the recognition that is taking place in the world right now, all the way down through every level. That these debts are not going to be paid. And yeah. Okay, well, if you've enjoyed this video, thought it informative, please like, comment, subscribe below. And in the meantime, this is Houndog Steve wishing you a very pleasant morning, and we'll talk very, very shortly. See you now. Bye.